Well, hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Jennifer Thomas, and I'm Managing Director of Plug and Play in Cleveland. And we're pleased that so many of you from across the globe are engaging with us again today as we present the next in our series on COVID-19. So today's event is entitled Beyond the Pandemic, Digital Solutions for Care Management. And although we're well aware that we're not beyond the pandemic, what we want to specifically cover today is how to best address and treat solutions for people who are still sick, whether they're chronically ill or they're in need of ongoing care management. So let's get to the agenda. First up, we'll have Neda Amidi. She's our Global Head of Health and partner at Plug and Play, and she'll go over briefly what we do at Plug and Play. But she's also going to announce our new initiative called Social Impact and COVID-19, as it has become clear that this pandemic has a far-reaching effect, and Plug and Play feels that we can do our part to validate and scale solutions that can restore communities and revitalize economies that are affected by COVID-19. And then next up, we'll have our fireside chat with Charlie Haddad, who is Senior Advisor for Digital Health at Eli Lilly and Company. Charlie will be interviewed today by Joe Kim, his colleague, also Senior Advisor in Translational Tech at Eli Lilly. And you will have the opportunity to ask Charlie questions after that, and our own Innovation Manager, Simon Moore, will be conducting the Q&A. So then, as we always do, we will feature startups. We have 3 today that address how to manage a range of conditions, including chronic illness, through digital platforms. And they are Care Team, Upside Health, and Digital Remedies. We've allowed a few minutes of Q&A for each startup, so please get your questions ready, and our Innovation Manager, Simon, will engage your questions with the startups. So finally, I want to bring your attention to some events that we have in the COVID-19 series. As you can see, even tomorrow is packed. We have so many events, so please check our website for the events. There's a great choice of events tomorrow, Smart Cities, FinTech, and SureTech, but we do hope that you can tune in to our event at 9 a.m. Pacific time, where our CEO, Saeed Amidi, will interview Rob French. He's CTO of Cushman & Wakefield, who have progressively addressed the COVID-19 pandemic with their Recovery Readiness Task Force in order to develop best practices on how to prepare to return to the workplace, which we'll all be doing in the coming weeks. So please tune in. So now I'd like to introduce Neda Amidi, our Global Head of Health and partner of Plug and Play.
Great. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And with that, I'll kick off an introduction to Plug and Play. Good morning out there. So Plug and Play has a combination of different pillars to it. At Plug and Play, our story really originated more from the real estate side of our business. And we initially started renting office space in the 90s to some small companies like PayPal, Google, Logitech, and Danger. And really through that building back then, we started cherry picking some companies and investing in them in their early stages. And this was really early on how we started our venture capital activities. And back then we would introduce these startups to venture capitalists to really get feedback on them and really know which companies we should move forward with. And that really became a big part of our model. And in 2006, we decided to open Plug and Play in the current form. So in our headquarters in Sunnyvale, where we have over 180,000 square foot building, we have, if we can go back, sorry, one slide. We have over 400 startups in the building, and really a lot of activities from investments to corporate innovation and the accelerator programs. And really for corporate innovation, that started in 2018 to 2008, sorry, where we started engaging with corporations, really asking them for their pain points and then matching those startups to corporations that are interested in doing pilots, licensing deals, as well as investments. And in 2013, we started our accelerator programs, where we now have over 50 accelerator programs internationally, where we introduce startups to corporations and do this through a 3-month accelerator that I'll go into more details. So today, these are the 17 different industries that we run. We started our health practice that we'll focus more on today in 2015. We also started our impact and COVID-19 program this year, but you'll see a wide range of different industries. And really for our social impact vertical and to end COVID-19, our vision is to protect the lives and livelihood of those affected by COVID-19. And our mission is to validate and scale solutions and restore communities and revitalize economies by connecting innovation technology with platform for partners, which is really aligned with what we do at Plug and Play, connecting technology solutions to corporate partners that are interested in scaling those technologies. The different topic areas that we'll cover, so health being the one that we'll highlight today, supply chain, as well as enterprise and commerce. And we have a series of events that are focused on these different topics. We've had a number that have already taken place and more to come as well. Within healthcare specifically, that's what this group is interested in. We'll be covering topics like ventilators, respiratory protective devices, point of care diagnostics, molecular diagnostic, population health management, symptom trackers so that we can avoid people going into the hospital when they don't need to, and also to be able to remotely monitor patients as well. The selection process and how it all works, very similar to our other programs. In the first stage, we work with the business units, determine who's going to engage in the program. We define the partners' interest areas in stage 2 and the focus of the program. Stage 3 will source through our ventures team. We have a team of about 40 folks on the venture side that actively source for startups based on the corporate partners' interests. They select the companies and share that and have a selection event to confirm the companies with the corporate partners. And lastly, we begin the program and start the pilots. Throughout the program, the timeline that we cover, we went over the engaging the pilot partners, so that's currently happening right now in April. We'll have startup pitch events to confirm the startups that the corporations want to engage with. So that will happen every month. And these are in the form of startups presenting similar to what you'll hear from today, but they'll cover a wide range of the topics we covered earlier. Then we'll do deep dive sessions to set the pilots between the corporations, the government entities, the NGOs, and the startups, and really to figure out the details there. And then lastly, we'll have a summit or to graduate these companies and to celebrate the wins, and that will take place in the fall. Well, thank you so much for joining me. If you're interested as a corporate partner or nonprofit or any entity interested in this program, please feel free to contact me. If you're a startup looking to learn more, all of our videos, all of our content and interest areas are featured on the website pnptc.com/COVID-19, as well as the application page. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Netta. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers today. So our featured speaker is Charlie Haddad. He's Senior Advisor and Digital Health at Eli Lilly and Company. And in this role, Charlie oversees product management and strategy for Lilly's digital health organization, where he's responsible for leading digital health solutions from ideation through delivery. He also manages the teams to deliver clinically relevant, high-quality solutions, and he makes sure they engage with and support the people who need it most. As you can imagine, collaboration is a huge part of these efforts, and Charlie partners with researchers, clinicians, marketers, developers, and external innovators to develop and to find the right digital solutions for patients suffering across a number of disease areas. Interviewing Charlie today will be his colleague, Joseph Kim. Joe is a senior advisor in translational technology and innovation and digital health at Eli Lilly. And in this role, Joe focuses on discovering and developing translational tech and digital biomarkers. but Joe also serves as the host of Lilly's podcast called The Elixir Factor, which explores stories and topics that inspire bold advances in science and innovation. Joe has spent 20 years in the pharma research industry, and he's been recognized as one of the top 100 individuals on the 2015 Medicine Makers Power List. So welcome, Charlie and Joe. And we're so pleased that we could have you here today sharing your insights. I'm going to quickly pass it over to Simon Mower to kick us off. Thanks, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Just to kick it off, we're going to have the Q&A to begin just in a moment, and then, the fireside chat. And then after the fireside chat, I'll host a Q&A with our speakers. So in the middle of your screen down the bottom, there's a little box, a Q&A box. So as we're listening to the fireside chat, please put your questions in there, and we'll do our best to have those questions answered by our speakers during that time. All right, without further ado, over to you, Charlie and Joseph.
Great, thanks, Simon. Thanks, Jennifer. It's great to be here. And Charlie, it's always good to talk to you, my partner in crime and digital health. So let's get right into it. So when we think about COVID-19, this has clearly upended the entire world in every sector. And let's not think about the infection per se right now, but it's also really affected the healthcare system in a number of ways. How do you see the pandemic actually providing some sort of fertile ground for digital health, given that distance and that being a constraint is kind of the hallmark of what's affecting us now?
Well, thanks, Joe. Glad to get started. And first, before I do jump in to answer your question, I just want to thank Jennifer and team for the opportunity to be here today. I'm happy to share a bit more about how we're thinking about Lilly's role in post-COVID or in managing through chronic care. I do want to share a special thanks to Adam behind the scenes, who's doing some work on the AV, because without that, in this environment, you talk about disruptions, we wouldn't be welcoming you into my home for today's conversation. And there's plenty of other minor inconveniences that we've had to deal with, and in many cases, major ones, particularly those that have contracted COVID-19. People are out of a job, and particularly want to highlight healthcare workers who have now been thrust onto the front line as the first parties to be fighting the disease and reconfiguring the way that they operate. And I think that reconfiguration really leads into the answer to your question. I would share around that is, while we've reconfigured to focus on COVID-19, what we haven't done is given other diseases and conditions a 12-week social distance break. Babies are still being born, people are breaking their arms, chronic diseases are still needing care. And I think this is where the opportunity for digital health going forward comes into play very significantly. Let me just share maybe my own personal example that took place a couple weeks ago as a way to give you an example around this. So I had a cardiologist appointment, and I had to check in with them a week prior to say, well, is this still going to be on? Because it was just a routine follow-up. And so they said yes, he would do it through a telemedicine visit. And shortly before the appointment, the nurse reached out to me. She shared with me the process that we would follow, got me set up on the telemedicine platform that we would have the conversation. She also took my vital signs, which looked like her asking me my weight, and I told her. I was truthful. And that was it. Clearly not the type of a normal experience that I would go through when I go in and see a cardiologist. So then fast forward a few minutes, my doctor tried to reach out on the telemedicine platform. It didn't work. And so instead, he called me through FaceTime. And we went through the conversation very effectively. I shared with him that I have a watch that I could take an ECG on. And so I asked him if he'd like to have a copy of my ECG. He said, sure. So after the appointment, I took my ECG, I went on to the patient portal through their EMR system, and there's no way for me to upload a PDF file. So I had to work through the process with the nurse again to get her email address, and then sent my PDF off to them. And I guess the sort of the post-appointment note was that later on that weekend, I received a pocket call from my doctor who had accidentally clicked the FaceTime call again. So I think I share this story as an example of what I think we're seeing in terms of digital health challenges that are still sitting in front of us, that as we shift to this mode of needing to be more remote in our care model, the kinds of things that we would normally have and normally be used to in the context of our normal doctor visits are getting upended. And we're accelerating this transition through telemedicine and other capabilities that I think we're going to have to see an advancement in over the coming months and years in this new reality.
Yeah, so you alluded to kind of like a pre-COVID healthcare operation, kind of what you're doing now in this transitional model. How much of this do you think will stick? Like, what sort of trends might you see in digital health after the pandemic is quote unquote over?
Yeah, so a few of the trends that we hear a lot about, so clinical decision support, telemedicine, interoperability, personalized diagnostic sensors, and disease management and digital therapeutic solutions. These we've been hearing a lot about, but I think they've had a challenge in their uptake. And I think what COVID has done for us is it's sort of the traditional strategy shift on the S-curve. So we've now basically had a disruptive shift to that new S-curve of needing to operate differently around those 5 things that I just described. Obviously, telemedicine, I think, is probably the most mature of those things I just went through. And we're seeing that play out in the way that health systems are using that today. But if I just reflect on the experience that I just shared, all 5 need improvement, and particularly around remote diagnostic support that can then get the right kind of information into the care system, I think is a critical one. Interoperability is obviously critical. And I think we're also going to find that as much as we can, pushing care management out into the home and into our personal environment through things like disease management and digital therapeutics, I think those are going to be critical to help us enrich the way that we have that interaction with our care provider, especially if they're going to be more remote. So I think those are probably the 3 areas that we need to grow more. My general sense is that the trend of us needing to have these capabilities in play certainly is going to be in place for some time to come, probably until we've gotten through having a vaccine and treatment options that we can all feel confident in getting back to what would be a new normal. But my hope is that through the transformation that's happening, that new normal does include these types of digital solutions much more effectively than it has in the past. So I think they bring great value to a much more interactive way to get healthcare delivered to us.
Yeah, and in your personal story, you mentioned a couple of workarounds you used because some of the established tech wasn't kind of working correctly. But at the same time, you're then exposing yourself, and the healthcare provider is exposing him or herself to privacy issues and whatnot. So what are some of these challenges that have taken us that's been drawing out this adoption for digital health on a number of levels, not just telemedicine, but sensors and apps, fragmentation, ubiquity? What are the challenges there?
Well, I think rather than talking about in challenges, I think it's about paradoxes for me. It's about finding a balance in the way that we think about delivering these capabilities. So, for example, how to be data rich from a patient lens perspective, but also ensure privacy and security. This is what you just mentioned in your question. There's a fine balance there to find, and we certainly are all well attuned to the privacy issues that exist in our environment today as data solutions become more prevalent. But it's also critical that those data-rich insights get presented as part of our health picture to doctors. So I think finding that balance is critical. How to find the balance between patient and consumer ease of use or willingness to engage with a healthcare solution, and maintaining and integrating that into clinical care. So making it relevant to their doctor. That's another one of those paradoxes that it's fine if you have a solution that people use, but if the doctors don't see value in it in the way that they want to treat the disease, then it doesn't really get the type of engagement that it ultimately needs. And in fact, we're hearing from patients through some of the market research that we've done that doctors are who they trust, and so having the doctor feel confidence in the solution is going to make the patient more willing to use the solution. And then I think the third that we have to deal with is this balance between natural speed of digital innovation, and so harnessing the new sensors or the new apps or the new engagement models that might exist in the market, but also maintaining that scientific rigor and trust in the way that the clinical effectiveness of that product or solution gets developed with. I think across all three of these, trust is a critical factor, whether it's trust from the patient lens, trust from the provider lens, or trust that the solution itself is doing what we need to do. And so I think for us at Lilly, that's a very clear focus for us to make sure that the way that we're engaging with digital health is putting that trust in front and center in the way that the solutions are getting built.
Yeah, I want to double down on the trust aspect in a moment, particularly as it pertains to evidence, scientific and medical evidence. But let's talk a little bit more about this paradox. I like how you're framing this. Could you give us some more examples, something a little bit more concrete there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a real simple one is that early on we were working on a solution that was helping people with a dosing decision question at the point of their dosing activity. And, the app was very good. It was very usable, went through all the human factors testing, and it had associated with it an iPad app that was being used for engaging with a doctor, and it worked great in clinical studies. But I think as we learned quickly, as we got into thinking about next steps on that in this case of clinical relevance with patient usability, for an iPad experience that was both outside of the clinician's workflow as well as a separate device, that wasn't going to work for the way that we wanted to carry the solution forward and integrate into the market. So we quickly learned from that, and now we're very active and have been for years now on working on multiple ways to connect things into clinician workflow, and that's a core part of our strategy. So that's one example. Maybe another one I'd use, Joe, is that we have done a number of studies now working with digital sensor devices, and this gets sort of this question about how much patient richness in the data versus the privacy and security question. And the sensitivity that we anticipated for this was that while we sort of overloaded the study and these participants with a number of devices, that we anticipated to see less compliance with the use of the solutions or concerns around it. And surprisingly, and even in the case where we had a population that was of an older study population, we saw wonderful compliance. And it's in many cases it's not as good as it's not perfect compliance, but it's certainly much better than we anticipated. And so to me, that's also one of those opportunities of hope that as we do get new capabilities in place and the sensors that are in the market can become more rich and more advanced, that people who are genuinely concerned about their health will, if they can be presented with trusted solutions, will sign on to these and will be compliant with them. So maybe those are a couple examples of how we think about dealing with those paradoxes.
Yeah, great, thanks. So let's talk about Lilly's role. Some might say, why is pharma meddling in the business of software and technology? Just stick to making medicines. Why is Lilly interested in digital health, and what are we specifically doing structurally from an organization, from our research to get into this space?
Yeah, well, so you mentioned kind of why is Lilly or pharma in the business of software. You could also even broaden that statement and say, why is Lilly, who's a pharmaceutical manufacturer, in the business of digital health more broadly? And I think the answer is that there's a lot of different entities that play a critical role in this. And we clearly recognize that this isn't ours to solve by ourselves. So we know that we play a critical role within the ecosystem, but that it's also about interacting with the ecosystem that's going to be a measure of success for us. Having said that, I think there are areas where pharma broadly and where Lilly specifically are very strong. And I think it's these kinds of things that we want to replicate in the way that we think about digital health related solutions. So as I mentioned those paradoxes before, I believe that the role that pharma plays in innovation methods, scientific foundation, and rigor around that, I think is very strong. Our disease understanding is very deep, and engagement with the clinicians and understanding of their needs, I think, is strong. And then, we have a very strong focus on quality of our products and patient safety in the way that we deliver those products. And so, I think it's with that you can say, for the questions of those that would say, why is pharma in? I would turn that around and say, I think these are reasons why I think we should be, in fact, not only involved in some of these things, but leading them as well, particularly as it relates to patient engagement solutions that are focused on managing care. And then for Lilly, our view around this is to engage in areas that we participate in the broader health ecosystem. So focusing on areas of our portfolio like oncology, immunology, pain, neurodegeneration, and diabetes, and looking at ways that our digital health solutions can support better care for patients in those areas.
Yeah, great. And then so from a more tactical perspective, what's our actions? What are our actions there?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Your second part to your question. So, when you think about digital health, I think first that this is a broad term, and digitization can get used broadly as well. We see that term being used in pharma, certainly across the industry, and it can lend itself towards automation activities, artificial intelligence, improving the speed and effectiveness of clinical research. All of those are important, and we're involved in all of those at Lilly. But I think when we talk about digital health and the way that we define it, it's narrower towards enabling patient engagement solutions that either are in combination with our drug and devices or can be complementary, so disease-focused, that when implemented can also help patients with personalizing insights for their own care, so giving them ways to better self-manage their care, as well as giving those insights to their care provider, and looking at ways to pull through the value of those solutions with the patient first and foremost, to help them better manage their disease, with their doctor to provide that data in a way that's meaningful to them and to give them confidence that that person is managing their disease, and to the payers within the ecosystem who are wanting to make sure that their value is realized. So that's kind of at a macro level, the strategy that we're going after. We look at the way we're approaching this as a microcosm of our broader pharma R&D efforts. So the way I just described our work in digital health, it requires those same activities of research development and ultimately commercialization. And so we've established an organization which includes the group that you're in, Translational Technology and Innovation, which is focused on biosensor clinical research, a product management team, which is integrated with our disease and product teams out in the broader organization, that includes experience design and includes software, regulatory, human factors, and the like, to be able to develop the products. And then also an external innovation team. I think we've said this a couple times, but we recognize that we're not in this alone. And so looking on the outside and trying to find companies who are working on innovations that are a potential good fit for us, I think is the other critical activity that we have within digital health, and the role of that external integration group. And then within Lilly, we obviously need to stay connected to the broader drug and device teams. There's a really tight connection, particularly between digital health and our devices, especially as we look at connected devices, and also with our commercial organization, who ultimately is the ones who will be working to bring these solutions to market.
Yeah, great. So I think this has been a really great overview. You mentioned that there's an external innovation group, and we have a lot of other stakeholders on the line that I think might want to ask both you and maybe me some questions. So I'll hand it over to Simon. I think there might be a critical mass of questions there for you to start to moderate.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, Joe. So to start off with, we've got many startups tuning into the discussion. Perhaps you could let us know some key insights into how Eli Lilly works with startups, and if you are a startup, what's the best way to approach that? What does the process look like?
Sure, thanks, Simon. So first, we were a startup at one point in time, but we're now nearly a 150-year-old company. So we've established processes and functions, that may not always present the easiest way for startups to come and figure out how to engage with us. I think the first and most direct answer to that is out on our Lilly.com website, we have a partner with us page that also includes specific needs that we're looking for in the areas of digital health. So I would just encourage first and foremost to take a look at that site, and you can see some of the specifics that we have there. And we have a team sitting behind that looks at whatever folks would submit and assesses if we've got a good fit. And obviously, I think there's a good conversation that would have to take place around understanding where that company is and what they're interested in working with us on to determine what we do next. Once that happens, we've got a structured process that we follow that takes us through an assessment of the scientific and clinical rigor of the solution, its fit with our portfolio and customer needs, status of quality and regulatory, and the ability for that solution to be applied broadly across our portfolio. So those are the kinds of things we do through that process. Needless to say, I do think there's a critical discussion there for us to engage in to best figure out how that fit might work itself out.
Thanks for that. You guys mentioned in the conversation, some new focus areas that have, come to the fore in the age of in the age of COVID. I'm wondering, have those sort of interests accelerated or changed those processes of working with startups? Has that changed any of the internal priorities or processes with doing that?
I think in the short term, the answer is probably no, just because I would say more so as a company, we're distracted like any other company is right now with COVID, not only through the fact that we're working differently but as we've shared publicly, we're working on our own COVID areas with products that we're working towards, and I think we need to sort of work our way through that to then determine how to best evolve this going forward. But I think if I come back to my comment about trends early on, Simon, for us, what this has done is actually looked at those trends and said, there are areas that we do know we have to be more aggressive with. We're actually seeing a different level of uptake with some of our partners in different parts of the company that before didn't really appreciate necessarily the power of digital health. And now, obviously, we're all personally experiencing it, but even our business is being transformed by it as well in terms of the way that we interact with members of the health systems. So I think there's a greater receptivity to try and figure out how to position ourselves more appropriately for this going forward. And like I said, it's going to involve the market, especially if there are areas where we look to accelerate. We're going to have to engage folks in the market to help us get that capacity and skill.
Fantastic. And I suppose this question might come from one of our corporate partners. It says, what are the key challenges in integrating multiple internal innovation stakeholders, and how have they been overcome? I feel like that's one for the ages.
Wow. Yeah. So I appreciate the comment about how they've been overcome. So because I would just say I think it's a journey that we are continuing on. I think that for us, I think the challenge has been how to communicate digital health in a way that a company who is focused on developing and delivering molecules or pharma products to the market, drug products to the market, how to help communicate the intent and the value proposition in a way that first they can understand and understand its value, and secondly, that those solutions can compete from a value standpoint with other investment choices that exist in the company. And I think that's probably been the biggest challenge to deal with. And there's a point, I guess, when you say that you've emerged, when you're being asked to give a business case that is competing with, the next indication of a drug product. And we've had some of those conversations play out where we're trying to figure out a relative priority across those things. I would say I don't think we have all the answers there. I do think you need to create some capacity and investment and room for innovation in order to incubate ideas and work them through, which we started that with the organization that we've created. And then it's a matter of working the value proposition and working the scientific rigor and being able to combine those with into a story that you can compare with work that's happening in the organization. I think that's where we're going.
Yeah, fantastic. And speaking of some of these digital tools, we have a question here around virtual clinical trials. Has this sort of stimulated thinking around different kind of models for testing and maybe even fast track testing some of these technologies?
Yeah, I'm not in that area. I certainly would say that for digital health solutions, we've been very active in using virtual clinical trials with partners that we've shared publicly in terms of who we're working with on this. I think it's absolutely critical, especially in digital, to be able to access people as quickly as possible to test and learn on these products. And so we've done a lot of that. I don't know, Joe, if you wanted to weigh in on the broader virtual clinical trial question at all or not.
Yeah, actually, we've done a couple of small pilots with for drug trials that are not sensor or digital health focused that enabled people to get certain drugs from CVS or the local pharmacy. We've deployed home health nurses, use of devices, and other kinds of data captured locally in the home. So we are getting our feet wet, and we aim to do more of it for sure.
Fantastic. Look, and just as we head into the close of this Q&A, I always like to ask the question in terms of, as the crisis has come up and as it continues, perhaps both of you might have some insights just as innovation leaders within Eli Lilly. What's been the biggest sort of leadership challenge? What's been the biggest sort of personal challenge as you guys have been sorting through priorities, collaborating, working out where to focus and where to, which horses to bet on?
Yeah,
maybe I'll I don't know, first to Charlie.
Yeah, okay, that's fine, thanks. I think for me, I think it's been about, this has turned upside down our view of how we operate as a team and where to focus, to your comment, where to focus our priorities. And so I think, stepping back from the work that you're doing, and in some cases, looking at ways to address problems that 2 months ago we weren't even thinking about. I think that's probably been one of the bigger challenges to deal with, and it requires a lot of understanding of the outside environment. I've really diving into trend data that we're seeing happening within not just pharma but also broader in healthcare. And even to the way that we talked about, the question Joe asked me earlier around why is pharma in the space of digital health, evaluating the role that we can best play. I think there's plenty of areas where we as a company at Lilly, and you're seeing this happen, whether it's automakers making respirators, whatever the case may be, I think we're all trying to figure out how to step in and play the best role we can with the skills that we have. So I think personally that's been a challenge. I would also add the other item that briefly is just engaging with your team. That working remotely has really impacted, for me personally, that what motivates me every day is to interact with the folks that I work with. And it's been very difficult, I think, to do that even through this video experience. And so hoping to be able to get back out of this soon with this, as we can work our way back from social distancing at some point in time.
I'll add one thing, which is from my vantage point, the bar for scientific evidence is really high. And it's no secret that Lilly, like many other pharma companies, will stop development on drugs because the evidence isn't there. So we always need to keep that front and center.
Fantastic. And to land the plane, just very, very quickly, one thing that you're hopeful for, or one thing that encourages you as you look through the next month or two.
Yeah, I'll start. The fact that we're able to rapidly change our, our way of interacting with each other, certainly this is not everyone, but everything from schools to restaurants to conferences, the way we've been able to sort of pivot hard without any warning, I think is really hopeful, because now we've gotten our feet really wet. And I think this is a good tailwind for us to move forward with sort of digital solutions in general.
Yeah, fantastic. And Charlie?
I'll double down on Joe's comment in terms of the speed comment. Particularly, I think there's areas where we've seen companies, including things that we've done inside of Lilly, to rapidly innovate on something new. And I think there are great examples of that happening throughout the industry, moving at speeds that we have not moved at for some time as a country and as a world. So my hope is that we can continue to figure out how to find the speed element. I think we've got to make sure that we still maintain the controls and maintain the rigor that is critical. But the elements that we learned around speed in terms of working differently and making new innovations come to market, come to fruition, I think is what I would hope to see.
Fantastic. Well, Charlie and Joe, this has been really, really insightful. Really appreciate you being with us this morning. And I know that our audience will have gotten a lot from this. So thanks very much to both of you for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having us. It was fun.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you.
Fantastic. All right, folks, building off that, we're now going to go into our startup session. So the way this will work is each startup will have about 5 minutes to present. And then we'll have a 2-minute Q&A. So it'll be nice and quick, but as the startups present, please use the Q&A feature to ask your question. So the way it's going to work, each startup has a pre-recorded video, and then we'll have a live Q&A afterwards. So to start off, we've got Care Team. So let's roll the video.
Hi everyone, I'm Alexandra Greenhill. I am a physician and I'm the CEO and Chief Medical Officer of Care Team, the virtual health collaboration platform. So in the last 20 years of practice, I have been on the forefront of implementing the kind of innovation that has transformed our healthcare systems, from evidence-informed medicine to IHI to EMRs and EHRs and telehealth. And I have seen firsthand the impact of that innovation in real life. I also know, as many of you do, that we're not there yet, that there's much that we can do to fulfill the promise of digital health. And that's where Care Team comes in. We've used all of our knowledge to design it as a smart overlay that sits and fits on top of existing investments and leverages them so that we can quickly collaborate better between clinicians within the same organizations and across different groups, as well as include patients and community partners. And much more importantly, not just collaborate in a reactive mode or record what has happened, but be able to plan and ensure that the plan gets actioned and ensure that we can learn from every implementation so that we can do a better job the next time. So how Care Team was designed is an all-in-one solution. It allows you to do many different things for different users all on the same platform, so that there's a true 360 view of the patient. For example, in the COVID crisis, we've been deployed to help organizations triage and manage suspected and confirmed cases at home, ensure that information is sent to them real time, and there's an overall analysis of trends, gaps, and overlaps to direct resources to where they're needed. All while virtual coordination of primary and specialty care can be done, so that patients are clear on what should be happening before, during, and after a visit in order to use the resources the best and ensure that they are following the kind of instructions that they need to be following in order to maintain their health for the kind of conditions that cannot wait and are likely to get worse unless care continues for them, even within the pandemic. And last but not least, there's a side of our software that patients and families can use to implement all of this plan in real life, coordinate the things that need to happen within loved ones and support circles in the community in order for the patients to be able to deliver on the kind of instructions that they were given. The way care team works is that it recognizes that there's many different ways of delivering care, that sometimes you need to transfer care or manage in parallel or do shared care, but the same platform facilitates all of these variations and enables seamless transitions and adjustments. The fundamental structure of care team is that it needs to be easy to learn, recognize the different use cases and needs of every type of user, and it needs to be flexible. It needs to enable people to identify who's who on the healthcare team and on the patient side, what is their role relative to the action plan, be able to implement the care plan with appointments, tasks, and secure messaging, and then be able to monitor progress and identify patterns. This approach to chronic and complex healthcare conditions allows us to maximize what we do on the medical side, maximize what the patient and family can do, and recognize the importance of social determinants of health and better understand the data around where and what is missing in order to ensure that the patient can implement the care plans that we're giving them. There's a deep understanding of the clinical workflow and what clinicians and administrators need, as well as the patient and family workflow, all enabled within a healthcare-grade privacy enterprise software system, integration with existing other tools, and one of our innovations that is absolutely key to enable collaboration across organizations is that the sharing is enabled by privacy by patient, and you don't have to sign a BAA with every organization that you want to collaborate with. This allows us to create the kind of virtual care collaboration across the ecosystem that we have all identified as necessary, and deliver better outcomes, better patient satisfaction, better clinician satisfaction, and better uses of our resources. Thank you, and I look forward to questions.
Fantastic, and I believe we've got Dr. Greenhill with us this morning. Dr. Greenhill, can you hear me? You on the line? We've got a number of questions.
He's not showing.
No worries, we'll pull you up in a second. So we've actually had a number of questions in relation to EHR integration. So questions around, hey, does your solution eventually, is this collaboration with Cerner, Epic, etc., or is this eventually in competition? And another question around mobile patient applications. Could this be an add-on or otherwise?
I love the comments earlier from Charlie, because his experience is unfortunately things that I've heard patients have all over, and physicians as well. And so we designed Care Team to be sitting on top of other tools, so integrating into Epic and not duplicating what it does, but extending it into ways that the existing software just can't adapt fast enough. And his comments about patient use, we've seen also, it's not age dependent. If you build software that's intuitive and easy to use, any patient will adopt, or have someone in their household who can be the digital manager of their experience and ensure that the communication happens.
Fantastic. One really good question here around, could you just, like, in a short nugget, describe a case study or a particular use case from a patient's perspective?
Absolutely. We started with the most complex scenario of people living at home with dementia. And so our first organization to adopt was an acute care hospital that gave this at the end of the assessment with dementia, and enabled 22 community organizations and primary clinics to all come together and understand that patient who leaves that department, what happens next, whether they're referred to a dementia coach, community resources, they drop-in programs, is the family struggling or not, but without having to hire a number of nurses to do case management, enabling one or two nurses to use the software to guide and ensure the resources are there and people are participating well, but really extending the capacity of the clinicians to do what they were trained to do instead of shuffling paperwork or transferring over e-files. And each family stepped in. About half of the users, the family member doesn't live in the same city, but is involved
sure.
remotely in the care of a loved one.
And I suppose the asynchronous possibilities here are really important as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Got just to hop to the end here. We've got 2 questions around therapeutic area. Is this particularly TA-specific solutions, or could there be other therapeutic areas on the roadmap? And privacy by patients. I think you mentioned that along the way. That we've got one listener who Harvey Goodman would like to understand a little bit more about what that means. And just really short, because we'll have to land the plane.
Great questions. And so we use SOAP notes in healthcare as a format, and physicians use it, nurses use it in all kinds of settings, in all kinds of ways. And so we designed a software that is agnostic to the content, because there's often as much variability in practice within the condition than there is across the condition. And as a GP, my patients, the average patient has 7 health issues, and they're being asked to download an app for each one of them and for each organization that they use. That's just crazy. And so our tool sits on top and says, there's a certain number of things that need to happen. Who's who, what's the plan, what are the action items? And those can be very different, but similar across conditions. And the second question we had is, okay, we all agree we have to collaborate, but the BAA process and privacy and the tension that Charlie mentioned between comprehensiveness of data and privacy, how do you balance this out? Well, we said, well, easy, it's all about patient consent. If the patient consents and invites everyone to this neutral ground, which is care team, this works.
Yeah, it's a curious thing, and I knew it from healthcare, where patients often say, share my data, share it amongst my care team. And we're on the provider side saying, well, we can't, we're worried about that. So look, thanks very much for the wonderful presentation, great answers, and we'll hop on to the next startup now, but thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Cheers. All right, folks, let's hop on to our next startup, which is Personal Remedies. Again, we'll have the video and then a live Q&A. So let's roll the tape.
Hi, my name is Rachel Trobman, and I'm the CEO and co-founder at Upside Health, where we're reimagining the future of chronic pain care. Chronic pain has long been a problem for health systems and providers, not just because of the sheer number of patients whose lives are impacted, but also because of the enormous cost. Chronic pain patients on average go to the doctor more than 19 times a year, use 2 to 3 times more of the system resources, and are an enormous risk because of the long-term opioid usage. And this is even before the impact of COVID-19, where health systems and providers are seeing a reduction in revenue as a result of a reduced amount of elective or interventional pain procedures, having a lack of time and resources to allocate to these already very needy patients, and then a lack of visibility into these same group of patients who need to be monitored regularly for opioid usage. And the current solutions are not geared towards chronic pain. They're difficult for patients and providers to assess progress and see changes. They lack scale, and they're draining these physicians who are already time-strapped. And so we know what works, and that's not just it's a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy, continuous management, risk assessment, access to integrative resources, and a community component, all through an interface that is using software to reduce cost, reduce burden, and reduce risk. And we use this, our software is called Ouchie. Ouchie is turnkey, evidence-based, award-winning, revenue-generating, and time-saving. So what does it do? First, it uses remote monitoring. Patients track not just what hurts, but how it impacts their mood, their sleep, their functional abilities, and more. We can also connect to wearable devices to gain passive data. And from this information, we connect patients to others because no one should hurt alone. This reduction in isolation and connection to community is incredibly valuable during this time. Then we provide patients with access to educational tools and behavioral health exercises that respond to the patient's particular needs at the particular times. Our library includes meditations, exercises, behavioral therapy workbooks, and insight into their progress so far. And we reward that progress. Patients have incredible adherence to our app because they are rewarded for the success they see in the everyday. And in the wake of COVID and with the expansion of reimbursements, we've also allowed providers to tap into our network of experts to offer telehealth or to offer telehealth directly to their patients through our platform. Patients love it, spending 8.5 minutes per session using the app, updating their journeys an average of 4 times per week, and we've had more than 10,000 patients with 35% using it for more than a year. 80% of our patients actually sign up within a week of being introduced by their providers. Clinicians gain not just insight into what's happening beyond the 4 walls of their health system, but also revenue to the tune of $160 per patient per month, and that's not even including telehealth. We've been gaining also valuable insights. There's been more than 76,000 interactions between the patients and each other and also their providers, and we've gathered more than 500,000 data points in less than 18 months. During this time, we have not just grown our audience, but have also received vital funding and partnerships from places like Bayer, Yale, the NIH, and have signed on partnerships and client relationships with Mount Sinai, Columbia Memorial, Cambridge Health Alliance, and more. Our team is full of passionate people who love to build products people use, but also come from a place of compassion, having been patients, clinical directors, and pain specialists. We've accomplished a lot in our life cycle, but are really now excited about what's to come and how we can help solve this problem together. My name is Rachel Trobman. I'm the CEO of Upside Health, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Fantastic, and we're really honoured to have our startups with us this morning. So I apologise, I got the startups mixed up in my head. So Rachel, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Simon.
Fantastic. Hey, we got one first question. What's been the immediate response from providers who've been using the product in the current moment with COVID?
Yeah, I mean, the response and the interest in our product has just escalated in the past couple of weeks, particularly as I highlighted that it is just really difficult to support these patients, and the reduction of non-essential or non-immediate care. And so we've seen like 80% of our providers being able to integrate their patients within 48 hours. And
Wow.
being able to see, and seeing
That's
immediate,
great.
and seeing immediate use of the product and being able to take action off of that.
Well, so I assume EHR integration is, how have you guys solved for that challenge?
Yeah, so for large practices and health systems, we can integrate with Epic, Cerner, Allscripts, and we can integrate in various levels depending on the health system's needs. So whether it's simply attaching a media file from each update from the patient, all the way to being able to prescribe it, works both ways. With smaller practices, we're looking to expand our capabilities in that way. Right now, they're using our standalone dashboard and haven't had many issues with it.
Fantastic. We've got one question, just to be the last one. Does the revenue increase result from documentation or increased interaction? I suppose that might be a volume over value question.
Does the revenue increase result from the documentation or the increased interaction? It actually increases from the review of from the increased interaction, but the remote interaction. So from the enhanced interaction between the providers and the patients.
Got it.
But it's a little bit more nuanced, and I'm happy to discuss all of the revenue opportunities, because you're looking at from both a top line and a bottom line perspective when you're dealing with chronic pain.
Yeah, fantastic. And for each of our startups, we've got the little poll that will come up. So we'll make sure that we connect you with those who are interested. So thanks so much for being with us today, Rachel. Really appreciate it.
All right, thanks for having me. Bye.
Awesome. All right, folks, we'll hop on to our final startup for this morning, which is Personal Remedies. And we've got the CEO, Maury Bahar, with us this morning. So we'll cue the video and then we'll have a live Q&A.
Hello, my name is Maury Bahar, and I'm here to tell you about Personal Remedies. I have only 5 minutes, so let me dive right in. It normally takes me 45 minutes to just introduce myself. At Personal Remedies, we provide fully automated, personalized dietary guidance, taking into account an individual's multiple illnesses, allergies, dietary preferences, and medications. Many say food is medicine. We provide the enabling technology for it. How do we do that? Imagine your favorite food, let's say grilled octopus, and imagine an illness, let's say pancreatic cancer. There is no clinical study, there is no NIH-funded initiative that tells us whether this given food is helpful or harmful to this given illness. But there are all types of resources in form of research available on nutrient and disease interactions, and there is all kinds of information about nutrient content of various foods. Our AI-powered software and algorithms can digest, analyze, and summarize all such studies and research to establish a relationship between every individual food in our knowledge base and every chronic illness, and we have over 200 chronic illnesses. So that gives us one of the largest food disease interaction knowledge bases in the industry. How do we quantify, how do we monetize this information? Well, we will shortly see capabilities of our knowledge base through our website. But one way we monetize it is through our industry standard API. Enterprises can license access to our knowledge base through our API. We also have over 40 different mobile apps, each focused on one chronic illness and its common comorbidities. The latest ones are Choose This, Not That for coronavirus, and another one is for opioid use disorder. This is a screenshot of our coronavirus app that we just announced and is available on Android at the present time. As you can see, an end user can pick the profile that most appropriately represents their situation. Apps can also provide recommendations on what are the best choices within a given food group. As for our team, I would love to tell you more about them. I've been around for a while, and a couple of companies I worked for went public. Dr. Lenhard is our medical director and established author of a couple of books and is a primary care physician. Katya has PhD in nutrition from Tufts University. And Frank Slutman is frankly a rock star in the high-tech industry. In 2012, he was ranked as a top CEO in the country. Now let's dive into a demo of our capabilities so I can substantiate all these wonderful claims that I've been making. So let's create a fictional profile. Let's say we have an adult woman. Let's say this woman suffers from polycystic ovary syndrome and happens to have some excess weight. And let's make it more interesting and say she has high blood pressure. As you can see, by the way, there are a variety of illnesses, diets, cancer, various types of cancers, various types of diets and medications that one can choose for the profile. So now our system will provide, based on that profile, list of the type of food choices that are helpful to this person and the type of food choices that are harmful to this person. You can also get answers to questions such as, who said and why did you say trout is so wonderful for, say, high blood pressure? So if I click on that, you will get the list of all the resources or references and sources that stand behind that particular assertion. And similarly, you may ask, why is croissant so terrible for polycystic ovary syndrome? And again, you get a list of sources that stand behind that assertion. So That's basically it. Just to wrap up, I can also show you that you can get the list of recommendations organized by food groups. There are 10 different food groups. These are all good, and these are all bad or harmful. I hope that I have not succeeded in confusing everyone. Thanks again for your attention.
Not at all, although I would like to see that 45-minute introduction, Maury. Thanks very much for being with us this morning.
Pleasure.
So a few questions. Who are your top customers at the moment? Where are you rolled out?
Okay, we basically switched our strategy from B2C to B2B about 18 months ago and focused on marketing and promoting our API. And in that regard, we have signed up organizations such as Edamame. They have several million recipes in their database, and they have established customer base of all types of established big names like Food Network and so on. And they take advantage of our ability to establish helpfulness or harmfulness of a given ingredient as it relates to a given illness. Using that data, among several million recipes, they can identify what are the best recipes for someone who suffers from high blood pressure, who suffers from rheumatoid arthritis, and so on. And so that's, one of the key partners and customers that we have. Prior to going to introducing our API, we also signed up telehealth organizations on the West Coast, for example. Go Health Now was able to provide personalized dietary guidance to people that they serve through their telehealth model.
It seems like a terrific resource. In terms of the clinical validation, the literature behind it, could you talk just a little bit about how you validate the studies? Are they only US-centric? Are they go beyond the States? How are you guys thinking about that?
Excellent question, Simon. Remember, we are not in the pharma business. We don't conduct clinical studies. But the studies that we use as sources and references for what we provide are all screened, and we ensure we take advantage of the best evidence-backed studies that substantiate the relationship between a given nutrient and a given illness. So you should view our technology as an e-dietitian, okay? It just so happens that our dietitian doesn't forget anything. Our dietitian knows about relationship between 90 different nutrients that we track and 2,000 different food items that we track. Right there, that's 180,000 relationships that we remember.
Right.
Our dietitian remembers about all the research that's available out there about various illnesses and dietary impact versus those illnesses. So that's really what we bring to the table. We're not trying to contribute or provide original scientific contribution. We are trying to improve the status quo by not just 20% or 50%, but 1,000% because of our ability to process all that data and all that information.
Yeah, it's that aggregation and actionable intelligence. So, Maury, thanks so much for being with you. We've got to end the session this morning, but very much appreciate you being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Fantastic. And folks, I'm Simon Moore. It's been a pleasure to moderate the sessions this morning. Thanks for having me, Jennifer and team. And I'll hand back over to you, Jen, to close out our session today.
Thanks, Simon. We just want to thank everyone for joining us today, and our speakers, Charlie Haddad, Joe Kim, our startups, Care Team, Upside Health, and Digital Remedies, and of course, all the awesome Plug and Play team that makes these events happen. Please join us tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific, for a chat with Cushman and Wakefield on recovery readiness. And the recording of this event will be available shortly on our Plug and Play YouTube channel. Please go there and subscribe, or you can reach out directly to me. So have a great day and stay safe and healthy. Take care.